Hey guys, welcome to Quinnia's Budget Crafts, and today, what? What is going on here? Wow, thank you guys so much. I had no idea people would actually be interested in what I'm doing. That's amazing. Well, I guess let's keep building this module. I'm going to break this up into two parts. For this one, we'll do these two thin rooms that aren't flooded, and then next week we'll do the other two rooms. I will be doing water effects in the two that we're building today, but not until I've gotten the other two done. That way I can do it all in one shot. And that little side room on the bottom left we'll just throw in there somewhere. So just like always, cut out some EPS foam to use as your base. The water is supposed to flow down into the two rooms to the left, but I don't want this thing sitting like 6 feet off the table or anything, so we're just going to go a couple sheets of the ready board high, just to adjust the height a little bit. The sizes on these two rooms are 8x4 and 6x8 minus that little 2x4 section. To cut out that little section, just put your square on there and run the knife along the edge. Just don't cut too far into your thing. You can always come back and cut out the corner exactly. And we put them together to make sure they fit. And I mismeasured something. That's alright, it'll be fine. Just trim it off. Okay, now that they match, go ahead and drop it on some ready board and roughly cut out where it's sitting. You're going to want a little bit of overhang just to make your life easier when you go to stick these together. And to get that raised height on this, we're going to do 2 sheets of ready board. Then it occurred to me with the added height on these two that the statue room where the water comes from is now too low. So same thing for it, a couple sheets of ready board. Just take them outside, spray one sheet of ready board, stick the other onto it, then spray the other one, bring it inside and stick your EPS down. And then trim off the edge. For trimming the edge on the statue room, just run the knife as close to the statue thing as possible, like around the outside, making several cuts as you go. Then once you have it basically trimmed to shape, just go in with your really sharp X-Acto and trim off right around the edge until you get it as close as you can without actually cutting into it. Then you can take some 100 grit sandpaper and smooth that over. Careful when sanding foam, the dust from it is not good for you. So don't breathe that in or do it outside, wear a mask, something. I had the shop vac running the whole time I was doing that, so it was sucking up all of the dust for me. And then I cleaned up with the shop vac after. So the map shows these little tunnel things going off to the other rooms. I don't want to do those because it would make storage of these things kind of a pain. But we do need to mark where the things join each other. Once you've got that figured out, just go ahead and bevel off the edge. And Hero Kids does use the grid, so you got to put the grid on there. In this case, though, it's just 2 walkways, so you only need 1 inch from each side. Now that you know where your walkways are going to go, you need to put in the spillway. So my square is just a hair narrower than the middle that was left after you're drawing in the 1 inch grid thing there. So I just used that rough eyeball to figure out where the middle is going to be, traced around that, and then cut that out. As long as you haven't left it too long, your Super 77 should let go for the most part. So you can peel these apart. And then I did the same thing with my ruler, because it's a little bit narrower than the square. Now you can do whatever kind of bottom you like. You can leave it smooth or make it all tiled looking, whatever's going to work for you. I wanted mine to look a little bit like rocks, so I just went ahead and carved down until I started scraping the surface of the EPS. Something interesting is the shop vac nozzle is the right size to fit in there like just perfectly, and you can use it sort of as a carving tool, just scraping it along and it'll pick up whatever comes off easily. And go through and clean off your little ledge there, anything that's still stuck. For the second one, I just used the marks I had on my first one to lay down the marks on the new one, just to keep it consistent with each other. I think my method cutting out this one was probably a little more efficient too. I cut the first line just deep enough to take off the top layer, and then I went through and cut the second line next to it all the way down to the EPS. When you do that, you can actually feel it cut differently. It like kind of shreds at the EPS a little. Then just run some cuts through the middle where you want to remove the ready board. And if you're super lucky, it'll peel up nice and easy like this. It only worked on those few strips. I ended up breaking chunks out later. All these little chunks that chipped out of here kind of look like destroyed bricks. So if you're going to be making a rubble pile, you can go ahead and use these for that. If you're not doing a rubble pile within the next day or so, just throw them away. the trash. So the map shows pipes and stuff, which means we're going to need walls. I wanted the walls to be about an inch tall so I could still put things on them, but they're not in the way of playability. After doing all kind of crazy measuring, guess what I came out to? 2 inches. Still have a bunch of those 2-inch strips laying around? This would be perfect. If you don't have any 2-inch strips laying around, just go ahead and cut some. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and draw in your grid. Do it on both pieces. And now I'm going to borrow a couple techniques from Blackmagic Craft. Or at least he's the first person I saw use it, so he's getting credit. Just take a Sharpie, because the ink in Sharpie, the fine tip Sharpies, actually melts the ready board a little bit, and draw on some cracks, or do a diamond mosaic, or whatever you want. Just add some detail so the tiles aren't plain. If you want the tile to look like it was broken from impact, you can just make all your cracks join at one spot. Then, when you go back and texture, crumple up a ball of foil and roll that over your thing for the texture, and where the impact area is, just take a pointy part of the foil and just jam it in there real hard, just to make a depression. Go through and cut all your lines. And for that little ledge after your tiles, cut lines in them too, somewhat at random, just so it looks like smaller paving stones. Run your ballpoint pen through there to widen out the lines. And add some cracks and stuff to your little paving stones if you want. With the black Sharpie on the white foam there, it looks a little bit extreme, but it'll make more sense when it's painted. As for your wall panels, same thing, just roll the foil over them and there you go, texture. Glue them on with some hot glue. Don't forget about any overlap where you have multiple walls joining. And then go ahead and seal the whole thing up with a mixture of black paint and Mod Podge. Using the black paint here instead of whatever base color you're actually going to paint the things really helps because it gets in all the cracks so that later when you do black washes or whatever, it's already halfway done for you. So I didn't want plain gray because that's boring. And then the room it's attached to, that statue room, is all dirt. So I mixed about a drop or two of territorial beige with some pewter gray to get kind of like a grayish tan. And then paint the whole thing with that. Then go in with your pewter gray and dry brush. After looking at the map a little closer, it occurred to me that each of these segments actually needs walls at the end. And I totally forgot to put them on there. But that's fine, it'll be fine. Just make some walls and stick them on there. I forget another wall later too. But if you're following along, go ahead and put walls all the way around. Now the wall between these two segments, I made it 3 inches high because I wanted it tall enough to put a door into it and a little archway for the water to flow through. So just kind of freehand out an archway about as tall as you think it needs to be. And cut that out. Use your mini to figure out how tall you want your door to be, and then cut that out too. I made my door 1 inch wide to fit the tiles. There you go, something like that. And then just make a copy of that to put on the other one. Do your texture and Mod Podge, hot glue it on. And while you're doing the texture here, go ahead and cut in like a stone archway sort of thing, just so it's not just a hole. That wouldn't make much sense. Paint it the same way you painted the rest of the place. Then go through and do a very light dry brush with some antique white. Not really trying to hit everything, just a few spots here and there, a little random. And then black wash everything. I'm using my black, brown, and green mix. It's mostly black, but the green and brown add that sort of dingy color to it. Make sure your other paints are totally dry before you black wash or you're going to smear everything. Okay. So now, take some of these plastic arrow picks. They have 2 ends on them. One end is a spear and the other end is a ball. I'm going to use these for railings. I really like the way it looks with the spike sticking up, but the spike is really sharp and every time someone goes to move a minion there, they're going to get impaled and that's no fun. So we're going to use the ball end. Because of the way these were molded, some of the balls have like a little thing sticking off of it. Just pinch it off with your thumbnail or cut it off with an X-Acto. They don't look very good plain black, so we're going to use some of this folk art metallic gunmetal. And you can use a paintbrush, a little tiny one here, and just sort of paint it on like this. But that takes forever. So instead, get a whole bunch of them. Get a glove, because this stuff is real hard to get off your fingers. Dip the end in there, and then wipe the paint off with your gloved hand. Now while you still have paint on your glove, do the next one, and keep doing that until you run out of paint. Then at that point you dip the next one and continue. And if you have a spare block of EPS that somebody has already stuck a whole bunch of these things into, you just stick them in there to dry. For the thing to actually make a railing, I'm going to use chain. This is some of that little hobby chain you can buy from Walmart. It just costs a couple bucks. I determined that the spacing between the posts is going to be 1 inch, so at the grid lines. And I want the chains to droop a little, so I'm putting the posts about 1.25 inches apart. On this chain it's roughly 13 links, but I got tired of counting them and just sort of eyeballed it. Also, for the height of them, 1.25 inches worked out pretty well for that too. That's not how tall they actually are, that's just so you have some to stick into the foam. So I found the most effective way to do this is to get a whole bunch of these, however many you're going to need for each thing. Just count your grid squares. If you're following exactly, you're going to need 3 chains that are 9 posts long and 1 that's 13 posts. So get all your spears. Figure out where about 1.25 inches is going to be. Hold on to both sides of your things and then clip them in half with snippers or scissors or whatever is going to work. To put the chain on the post, just put a little bit of glue on the post itself, then put the chain on top of that and put a little bit of glue on top of that. Regular old liquid super glue works just fine. The easiest way to get the chain on there is to figure out which link you're going to put on the post, put your glue down, pick up the chain, and then slide your post under or move the whole chain on top of there to where you got the link laying flat, and then put another drop of glue on. Just go all the way down your whole line of chain doing that. And then if you're impatient like I am, you want this glue to set pretty quick, you can bust out your little tin full of baking soda. I swear, YouTube gods, this is baking soda, not what you're thinking. And just pull the chain and post through it like an assembly line, scooping a little bit onto each one. The post will have already stuck to the chain at this point, and this is mostly to keep you from sticking yourself to the chain. Then take one of the sharp end of your stabbies and go around pre-poking all your holes. Take some tacky glue and squirt a little bit into each hole. And then stick all your posts in. I chose to put the chain on the outside portion of where it's connected to the post. You can do it however you want. And then take a brush with a little water on it and go around the base of each post to make sure you don't get a blob of tacky glue. So the module is extremely unclear on how you're supposed to navigate through here, so I'm definitely taking liberties. Any of you guys ever play Final Fantasy VIII? Remember the sewer under the city? Going for something like that. So I'm going to put a gate here. Just put one of the spears up against your doorway there to see how long you need it. Cut that off and use the cut one as your guide. And cut several more. I ended up going with 5. Take 2 others, lay them out horizontally, put your 5 on top of them, and then put your super glue where each one joins. You might have it shift a little, it's okay, just push it back over with your X-Acto. Pick it up and wipe away the excess super glue, and then douse it in baking soda. Both sides. Go ahead and snip off all but one of the ends sticking out so you have a handle. And paint the whole thing metallic gunmetal. Speaking of the gunmetal, I actually painted the chains with that too, but I lost the footage. They were just a little shiny for me. Now take some metallic copper and just sort of dab it here and there. I know copper isn't rust, but in this instance it kind of looks that way. It works anyway. Put a little tacky glue down, dip both sides of your gate in there, and stick it in place. If you measured correctly, it'll hold itself in with tension. So just looking at the layout here, where the doors are and stuff, it occurred to me that this walkway on the other side is basically useless. From a playing standpoint and from a useful realism standpoint, you can't get to it. So I decided to put in a bridge. For the bridge, we'll just take a couple of those skewers and figure out how long we need them to be. Then take some of this granny grating Cut it to whatever width you like, and then very carefully cut the little nubs off the side so it has smooth edges. Figure out your length and do the same thing there. And now glue your plastic skewer sticks to the bottom side of the granny grate. Just a dab on each end is fine. Drop that in place and paint it up with some metallic gunmetal, and then hit it with some copper to make it look a little rusted. So now there's chains blocking the way. Just use a pair of cutters, like my neat little pink handled ones here, and snip the chain out of the way. You can leave it dangling, you can remove it completely, however you want to do it. If it comes off your post while you're cutting it, that's not a problem, it'll be fine, just glue it back on. Best way to do the baking soda, if you did have to glue it back on, is put the lid from the tin underneath where you're going to be dropping it so you don't get it all over the place. The transition between the statue room and the aqueduct sewer thing is a little harsh. So take a little territorial beige and put what I guess would be dirt, kind of wide at first and then sort of narrowing out as it goes down the trench. Then do the same thing with some glue. And dump some dirt and sand on there. If you want some rocks, you can put a little dot of glue to put a rock on. And then go over it with the 50-50 water and Mod Podge to make it all stick. So while that's drying, take yourself some straws and spray paint them with gray primer. Get some toothpicks, some dowels of various sizes, some barbecue sticks, basically anything round that's a size you might want to use. These are going to be your pipes. Paint them all with your metallic copper. If you have other metallics, feel free to go crazy here. So again, I'm taking liberties. I'm not going to follow the map exactly with how the pipes are laid out. For one thing, it looks like a Mario underground area, and I don't like that. Also, they're kind of strange, like weird little nubs sticking out of the wall. So what I'm going to do instead is take this medium-sized dowel and cut it to the same height as my wall. Then take more of the same dowel and hot glue it to these little wooden discs I have. Paint all this up with the copper again. Put a little black dot on the middle of the big piece that you glued on. That's going to be the end of the pipe. Then glue the long pipes upright against the wall so they're out of the way. And then the ones with the little end cap on them in line below them pointing into the trench. Just to vary it up, I'm going to take some of this big dowel and put it in the corner over there. And use a straw and a larger wood disc for the outflow of that pipe. These pipes are way too pristine for an ancient civilization, so go through and blackwash them, hit them with a little gray something, age them somehow. Still isn't looking quite right. It's kind of bland. So go through with some English ivy and put some green stuff down. Pretty much anywhere water is going to collect but still have access to air. So next to the pipes, cracks, that kind of thing. Take a little bit of 50-50 water and Mod Podge. Very carefully get it on your brush and let it flow just into the cracks. Not all the cracks, just where you're going to want some moss. Take some of that Luke's APS flocking that we used in the last episode and put that down where you put down all the glue. You can have some going up your pipes. You can put a little bit on the chains like this. I mean, it looks pretty good. Just keep putting it on there, shaking it off, checking it. If you don't like it, put some more glue, some more flock. Put a little bit on the bridge. And then that big wall that's got the archway, go ahead and put some glue there so it gets into the cracks if you can. And then some just on the wall randomly. Just, you know how moss kind of climbs on its own? Doesn't really make any sense. Decided that wasn't quite right. Put a little more glue down so it would go all the way to the ground. A little more flock. Shake it off. There you go. That looks pretty good. And then do the same thing to the other one. And once you get there, you guys know the drill. Hose down all your loose stuff with some matte clear coat. Mod Podge and black paint up on the outside. You may be thinking this doesn't look quite finished, and you're correct, it's not. We are definitely going to do more. But when I pour epoxy to do all the water effects, I'm going to do all of it at once to keep the color consistent. We're also going to do some cool stuff with some color shift paints. But we'll do that next week when we do the 2 rooms that have the pools in them. So until then, thank you for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you on the next one.